This is WCRN Weekend with your host, Pat Rice.
Hey, welcome to the show, everyone. You are now tuned into another episode of WCRN Weekends with Pat Rice on AM 830. You can catch our show every Sunday at 3 p.m. here on WCRN. If you ever happen to miss an episode, don't worry. We have you covered. All you got to do is go to the internet and type in soundcloud.com/weekends with Pat Rice. And there we have all our previous episodes and interviews, over a dozen episodes. Listen to all of them. It's great material. And you know, I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful to be able to host a show on WCRN. I have to say that WCRN has been great to me and has given me so many opportunities, and I truly have a passion and love for radio, so I hope you guys enjoy the show. Today, I haven't done this in a long time, but I'm going to solo dolo it. So no guest, it's just me for 20 minutes. For some, you might turn off your radio right now. Others, you might just turn the volume up. Today's episode, I'm going to talk about, you could say, a pretty hot topic. I just recently learned something just scrolling through the internet and browsing the interwebs. You never know what you might see. The internet is full of information. And like one of my coworkers, Ted, tells me, back in the day, you would have to go to the library and actually look things up. They had these, he called them something carts. Like, they're these carts and you had to look up the books alphabetically. It was nothing like just hopping behind a computer screen, going to Google and being like, oh, hey, Google. Oh, hey, Alexis, can you tell me where so-and-so is or who JFK is? Can I have the Martin Luther King biography? Back then, you would have to go on a 12-foot ladder in case they had bookshelves that were like 20 feet tall in your local library. Climb up the ladder, look at it through A, B, C, D, or backwards, or whatever how they do it by the author's last name. They taught me this stuff way back in elementary school, maybe even before then, but I don't think I've been to an actual library unless I didn't have a printer and needed to print something out since like 1998. And for you older folks out there, that's pretty pathetic. Because the generations before us used libraries, they had to actually search to do their research. People nowadays, the kids nowadays, we have it way too easy. And to get a little off topic, I didn't even expect to get this deep into this idea that's why I feel like a lot of millennials just expect things to drop right in their hands. Millennials, I just go to Google and just ask for the questions on my take-home tests, and there are the answers right there. Even though a lot of professors have gotten smart about that, and they make sure that their questions aren't on the internet. But back in the day, you had to go through chapters, got to learn how to go through a glossary and index. How many people in my generation know what an index is? Crickets. It's just incredible what technology has done. It's made the world a better place, but at the same time, it's done the exact opposite. I'm not here to go off on social media right now, or technology, but just how times have changed. And you know, you gotta allow times to change, because the world is forever going. The world forever turns. It doesn't stop, 24-hour cycle, every single day, 365. So you gotta get hip with the times, or you gotta get lost. Basically. Just to put it in simple black and white terms. And so I begin to think about the millennials. The millennials, I'm part of the millennial generation. I'm sure there's quite a few people that are part of the same generation as me that are listening. I got nothing against the millennials. I'm one of them. How can I turn my back on a group of people that I'm considered a part of? But there's just some things that aren't necessarily straight. And you can put that in quotes. From the likes of communication being lessened down to an email or instant messaging, no one picks up the phone and calls people. When someone's calling me, I instantly think that it's a spammer, it's someone trying to rob me for my money, it's going to be some computer saying I want a fake vacation, or it's my boss because he has something something important he needs to tell me, something I didn't do, or maybe some great news. But everyone's behind a computer screen. They can post pictures of themselves half naked, but in public, they can't even give you eye contact. And millennials, they have a huge voice in society nowadays because they believe, and I don't necessarily disagree with this, marijuana should be legal. Well, I believe people thought that since the beginning of time, going back to the 60s and 70s, the Cheech and Chong days, way back to the Reefer Madness days in the 30s and 40s. You know, I think that's always been a subject of debate. Though now, I don't know if the generation before us, our parents or whatever, the couple generations before us, raised us millennials to have such soft skin. Jeez, don't poke one of the millennials, they might just bleed. Don't call them an idiot, they might just cry and try to take their life. How did we become so soft? When I look at the men and women that raised me at least, were so strong, the fight that they went through. My dad, from Dorchester to being a successful man in the work that he does, and was able to get a nice place out in the suburbs. I'm far from rich. I'm far from the Lucky Sperm Club, like Douglas Rowan would say. I'm not from the Lucky Sperm Club. My dad always told me you need to work hard for what you want in life and cast your inspirations out to the universe. But a lot of these millennials, I deserve this. I believe I should be able to do that. I think I have the rights for this and that. And if you say something that offends me, I'm going to make it well known. I believe that everyone in this whole wide world should have equality. And I'm not against equality. People like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks were all about equality. That's a different story. That has to do with racism, and I'm not down with racism. I completely agree in that sense of equality. But when it comes to grown men that want to play dress up and be something that they truly aren't, now it's getting a little disturbing and confusing. Maybe it's confusing to the people who aren't doing it. I can't imagine to the people who are doing it. It's getting about that time. We have to take a quick break, but I got so much I want to get into and share with you. We are just getting started. In our next segment, we are going to get into the topic of transgender, the pros and cons of it in our society, along with something you might have not known about one of the male's chromosomes. You've been listening to WCRN Weekends with Pat Rice on AM 830.
Welcome to WCRN Weekend and your host, Pat Rice.
We are back. And in our last segment, I touched upon millennials, the forever changing society and world that we live in, along with equality, and the topic of today's show, which will be the transgender population within our society. In this segment, I am going to discuss about the pros and cons of transgender rights in our society, along with the disappearing of the male Y chromosome within human beings. Now, as you've heard many people say, and this isn't just coming from me, but we live in very interesting times. And you couldn't be more right about that. Not too long ago, the country made it legal for gay people to get married. I have nothing against gay people. I actually think it's quite beautiful that people of all kinds, race, sexual orientation, can find the partner of their life and fall in love with them and get married without a hassle. That is awesome. I believe everyone should find some kind of happiness within our world. I have plenty of friends that are gay. I know plenty of people that hang out with others that might be transgender or bi, gay, straight, whatever. And I think it's cool that millennials really strive for equality, even though there is a lot of inequalities and racism that still exists in our society. But we need to understand the pros and cons of each side. It's like a criminal investigation. The feds, the police, they don't go into some investigation without hearing both sides of the stories. You need both sides of the stories to create a full-length story. It's quite common sense. Now, I'm not a historian on the beginnings of transgender people, but from what I acquired through pop culture and music, it seems like being transgender was pretty underground. You never really ran into a transgender person unless you were in the underground, looking for someone to hook up with on the late nights in the center of town at some bar, or looking around the shadows and dark corners of prostitution. Now in 2018, being transgender is almost mainstream. So many people have spoken out about it, such as Caitlyn Jenner, who was originally Bruce Jenner, a Olympic triathlete and celebrity. Just one day turned 60 years old and decided he wanted to be a woman, but claimed that he had those feelings deep inside him throughout his whole life, which is beyond complicated for the average person to understand. There's a lot of psychology, you could even say chemistry. There's a lot going on into one thing. How the person was raised, what happened in their childhood, what happened in their life in general, mental health. I really don't know what it is. I think there is a percent of people out there who truly feel this certain way, that they feel like being the gender that they were brung out to be just doesn't satisfy them. But what I notice with this society, especially nowadays with social media, a lot of people don't seem happy with their appearances, the way they look, who they are. They change their face with these graphics and filters on apps like Instagram, Snapchat. They edit their photos for Facebook. They idolize too many celebrities, and the funniest thing is that celebrities are human beings, just like you and I. Some of them, since they have a ton of money, can just dedicate their whole life to working out in the gym and are able to afford the top products at Whole Foods. 99.9% of the population can't do that. A lot of these celebrities get injections, plastic surgery, and at the end of the day, that tells me that they aren't happy with how they look and who they are. I don't care if they say, well, I have all this money and this is what I want to do. They have all that money and they don't know what to do with it. So many people think that money makes them happy. Changing their looks makes them happy. To me, it's more of an addiction. I gotta spend more money. I gotta get another tattoo. More plastic surgery. I gotta change how I look. Could becoming transgender create that same effect? First, you start dressing like a woman or a man. Then you start taking special medication to change your body's chemistry, which I can't imagine is healthy for you. It absolutely cannot be healthy for you. Years down the road, we are going to see the effects of this mad scientist medicine that can transform a man into a woman into a man. And then, if you really want to get sick about it, in my opinion, sick about it, people are removing certain body parts just so they can be the opposite gender. And you know, that could be considered self-harm. People who aren't happy, depressed, they want to hurt themselves, change themselves, mutilate themselves. And I can imagine that typically doctors won't say no, because there is huge money to be made with transitioning. Huge! I mean, more than your college tuition. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Listen to this. In the year before surgery, counseling, you need to have counseling before you have any big surgery, can cost $50 to $200 per session, and letters from 2 therapists usually are needed for surgery. The total cost of the therapy and the letters can range from under $1,000 to more than $5,000 for that 1 year. And hormone therapy could cost $300 to $2,400 for a year, depending on which hormones are prescribed. In my opinion, this is mad scientist craftsmanship. Changing hormones? What's next? people want to become animals, inject me with the hormones of a pit bull. I want to be half pit bull, half man. That sounds like a deadly combination. If I saw a half man, half pit bull walking down the street, I think that would be worse than Godzilla. The website tsroadmap.com offers a detailed financial worksheet and estimates all the costs of transitioning, and estimate that the typical person will spend a total of $40,000 to $50,000 just for a mid-range transition. That's including surgery. For patients not covered by health insurance, the typical cost of a sex reassignment surgery can range from about $15,000 for just reconstruction of the genitals to about $25,000 for operations on the genitals and chest to $50,000 or more for procedures that include operations to make facial features more masculine or feminine. This is like Frankenstein mad scientist stuff. Kids, I'd save all that money for college, a down payment on a house, a brand new car, a nice vacation. That is highway robbery. And corrupted doctors, though, make their money off of individuals that want these surgeries done. We have to take a quick break, but once we get back, we will continue the pros and cons of transitioning transgender rights in our society, along with what could possibly happen to the Y chromosome. You've been listening to WCRN Weekends with Pat Rice on AM 830.
Now, WCRN Weekend continues. Once again, here's your host, Pat Rice.
And we return. In case you missed it, on our last segment, I pondered and questioned the topic and idea being transgender, along with going over some of the procedure costs to have surgeries to transition to become a male or female. And let me tell you, they cost you about more than an arm and a leg. And maybe a couple of other things, if you know what I mean. But it's super expensive. Though I came up with the theory, maybe transitioning can be something sort of like an addiction, like people with tattoos, piercings, plastic surgery. And the same people who conduct those kind of changes, treatments, and surgeries can be corrupted doctors that are in it for the jackpot. Another theory that I just thought of is maybe some people do it for attention. This goes back to wanting attention on social media, not being happy with yourself, how you look, who you are, just everything in general. I've seen on social media and online that there are parents out there who make the decision if their child is transgender or not. When your kid is 5 years old, they don't know what sex is. They don't know really what the attraction between a boy and a girl is. Just because your child, boy or girl, says, I want to be a girl, or I want to be a boy, or I feel like a girl, or I feel like a boy, when they are 3 to 5 years old, maybe even 8 years old, does not mean that they are transgender. I think it's completely normal that both genders, boy or girl, while growing up, will play with the girl next door, play with their dolls. And a girl might go over to the boys next door house, whether it's their brother or next door neighbor, and play baseball or wrestle in the mud. It's something that kids do, and there's nothing sexual about it. So I get fired up when I see parents online making a big deal, trying to create this movement saying, my kid's transgender, we want this and that in their school system. I think if the individual and the individual themselves come out as transgender, are believing in a different orientation, that is when the school system should acknowledge it. It shouldn't have to be other people behind that person forcing this idea or opinion onto them and their surroundings. Do you get what I'm saying? And people around the country are fighting for transgender bathrooms or locker rooms, or that if someone claims that they are transgender, like a guy claims that he's a female or a female claims that she's a man, that they are able to use the original opposite gender locker room or bathroom. To me, if you still have the body parts of the original gender that you were born with, you should just stick with the original gender bathroom or locker room. I think it makes it so much more confusing for everyone else, and it can present a sense of danger because not everyone is honest when it comes to this gender identity issue, and it has nothing against those who are transgender and what they believe in. It just has to do with safety. There's plenty of news stories right here in front of me from Daily Wire. 5 times transgender men abused women and children in bathrooms. One conservative argument against the leftist push goes as follows. Some men will abuse the bathrooms and locker rooms open to gender identity rather than biology by falsely proclaiming womanhood in order to gain access to women and children for motives of malicious activity. Such facilities could become easy access breeding grounds for predators. Thus, it would be common sense to keep the facility separated based on biology rather than identity to protect women and children. An example that goes along with this is someone that claims that they're a person in law enforcement. They get a police officer's suit, they might buy or rent themselves a car that looks like an undercover car, put in some fake siren lights, the whole shebang, and start pulling over people for their advantages. We've seen it in the news. We've read plenty of stories of it in the newspaper. I mean, this stuff really does happen. Here are some examples of some proclaimed transgender men taking advantage of the system. Example 1. A Seattle man, citing transgender bathroom laws, was able to gain access to a woman's locker room at a public recreational center while little girls were changing for swim practice. This man began undressing in front of little girls, and his excuse was that the new state rule allows people to choose a bathroom based on gender identity. Somehow, this man walked in right when there was a dozen little girls changing into their swimsuits for swim practice. Example number 2. A Toronto man claiming to be transgender was arrested and sentenced to jail for sexually assaulting several women in a women's shelter after he gained access to the shelter and its shower facilities as Jessica. Example number 3. A Virginia man was caught and arrested for peeping on and filming 2 women and a 5-year-old child in a woman's restroom after receiving entry by dressing in drag. And we hear and see in the news that there's guys that dress up in drag when they're committing robberies or home invasions to throw off the police on who their real identity is. Example number 4. A Los Angeles man dressed in drag entered a Macy's department store bathroom and videotaped women under bathroom stalls. The man reportedly disguised himself with a wig and fake breasts. He kept his video camera with him in a small purse. This man was secretly videotaping hours of footage of women in bathroom stalls for his own personal use. And then example number 5, 2 male students were caught at the University of Toronto exploiting gender-neutral facilities to peep on women in the shower with their cell phone cameras. This is why I believe in that bathrooms or locker rooms specialized for transgender people wouldn't be a bad idea. But the sad thing is that this can happen no matter what. Doesn't have to be with transgender people. It just has to do with people who have bad morals, no self-control, and are just your typical predator. It just takes that 1% of people to ruin it for everyone. But is this trend of transgender glamorization in the media preparing society for something that us humans can't prevent because of chemistry and science and how the world is? Studies have shown that the Y chromosome may be a symbol of masculinity, but it is becoming increasingly clear that it is anything but strong and enduring. Although it carries the master switch gene that determines whether an embryo will develop as male, XY, or female, XX, it contains very few other genes and is the only chromosome not necessary for life. What's even more disturbing is that the Y chromosome has degenerated rapidly, leaving females with 2 perfectly normal X chromosomes, but males with an X and a shriveled Y. If the same rate of degeneration continues, the Y chromosome has just about 4.6 million years left before it disappears completely. And listen to this. The Y chromosome wasn't always like this. If we rewind the clock to 166 million years ago, the early proto-Y chromosome was originally the same size as the X chromosomes and contained all the same genes. However though, Y chromosomes have a fundamental flaw. Unlike all other chromosomes, which we have 2 copies of in each of our cells, Y chromosomes are only ever present as a single copy, passed from fathers to their sons. What this concludes to is that the Y chromosome cannot undergo genetic recombination, the shuffling of genes that occurs in each generation, which helps to eliminate damaging gene mutations. So throughout time, the Y chromosome genes degenerate and they are eventually lost from the genome. The most important thing about the Y chromosome is that it's needed for normal human reproduction, though many of the genes it carries are not necessary if you use assisted reproduction techniques. This means that genetic engineering may soon be able to replace the gene function of the Y chromosome, concluding to same-sex female couples are infertile men to conceive. Let's just think about that. What is gonna happen with mankind? I don't know. You've been listening to another episode of WCRN Weekends with Pat Rice on AM 830. Join us next weekend for another fabulous episode.
This has been WCRN Weekend and your host, Pat Rice.